And welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, The Silly Ghost, coming back with a new bit of content that I'm keen to share with you all. In this video, we'll be taking a look into the history and stories surrounding the Aradale Asylum. So sit back and chill as we take a look at one of Australia's most haunted locations. Located in the rural town of Ararat in the state of Victoria in Australia, the Aradale Asylum was a psychiatric hospital built to accommodate the growing number of people suffering from severe mental illness. Construction began in 1865 and was opened for patients in 1867. Aradale also had two sister asylums that were built around the same time, which I might cover in another video. One in the Melbourne suburb of Kew, and the other in the country town of Beechworth. Aradale Asylum housed over 1,000 patients at any given time and employed around 500 staff. It was built to be a town within a town, consisting of 70 buildings, and had its own market gardens, orchards, vineyards, and livestock such as pigs. There was also a gallows, a morgue, and a graveyard on site. The courtyards where patients were allowed to roam around in are surrounded by what was known as ha-ha walls, where from the outside the walls look really low, so as not to give the impression of a prison, but on the inside the ground slopes down into a trench, making the walls loom larger and higher, and therefore made it impossible for patients to escape. I assume the ha-ha reference was mainly directed at the inmates staying in the J ward, which we'll look into next, by teasing them about the prospect of freedom being just out of their reach. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was also a way to taunt the other patients, given the time period this was in. One thing we have to keep in mind is that mental health as it's understood today was treated vastly different back in the 1800s. Back then, if you had a condition like postnatal depression, epilepsy, autism, and Down syndrome, you were considered mentally unfit for society and sent to places like Aradale. Now, of course, we have a much better understanding of such conditions and much more humane views and methods of treatment, for the most part. In December of 1886, Aradale Asylum developed a section of the hospital to be used as a jail for criminals who were deemed too insane for normal prison. This would become known as the J ward. This mixture of criminals and innocent members of society who just needed the right care created conflict and violence at the asylum. Some of J ward's most notable occupants included the notorious outlaw Mark Chopper Reed, who was transferred from prison in late 1978 after arranging for a fellow inmate to cut off both his ears. Chopper only remained in J ward for a few months before being transferred back to prison. Another occupant was a man named Bill Wallace, who was arrested and charged for murder in 1926 after shooting a man dead for smoking inside a cafe in Melbourne. Bill was declared insane and unfit to stand trial and was sent to J ward for an undetermined amount of time. Apparently, he loved it there so much that when Bill turned 100 years old in 1981, a petition for him to be released was granted. But Bill refused, stating, "Don't be fucking silly, I live here." He was moved to the geriatric ward at Aradale and would pass away in 1989, a few weeks shy of his 108th birthday. And then there was a guy named Gary Webb, whose story we will cover soon. During its 130 years of operation, over 13,000 inmates, patients, and staff members died at the asylum, leaving a dark stain on the property. Aradale closed down in 1993, and today the site is used as an olive processing facility and winery, as well as providing hospitality training for Melbourne Polytechnic. However, J ward and other parts of the former asylum are open to the public as a museum. Ghost tours are held at night due to all the stories over the years of strange paranormal activity, with many reports of visitors feeling nauseous, fainting, and experiencing sudden pains when entering certain rooms, along with hearing strange sounds and voices. Here are some of the main stories of ghostly encounters reported by both tour guides and visitors at Aradale Asylum. Gary Webb was a career criminal with a long rap sheet. One day, he decided to rob a pizza shop, but was spotted by an off-duty police officer. When the officer intervened, Gary ended up shooting both him and the owner of the pizza shop. Thankfully, both of them survived. Gary was sentenced to spend 14 years in J Ward at Aradale Asylum, but was told that if he behaved himself, he could get out in 8.5. Gary must have found it quite nice at Aradale, because, not long after, he started writing letters to the media telling them about all the horrible things he planned to do once he got out. This understandably frightened the public, and a special law was passed to keep him in Aradale for the rest of his life. Gary began to habitually self-harm and was hospitalised over 70 times. He even cut off his own, shall we say, beef sausage 3 times. After the third time, it was too damaged to reattach. He eventually succeeded in his quest for self-deletion, and today, Gary is said to haunt his former room at Aradale, screaming at visitors to get out and pushing them out the door. George Fittermont was the last governor to oversee the J Ward. In 1886, George was showing a group of people around the asylum when they started down a set of stairs leading into the underground kitchen. Suddenly, George fell to his knees, suffering a major heart attack. He died on the spot near the foot of those stairs. These days, tour guides and visitors claim to hear heavy footsteps and banging on that same stairwell whenever they venture into the underground kitchen. But when they go to take a look, no one is there. Visitors of Aradale who walk past the former office of the superintendent sometimes get a bitter taste in their mouth. According to reports, a superintendent died by suicide in that office after swallowing cyanide. This man's name was Dr. William L. Mullen, who died in 1912. The entirety of the women's ward is haunted by a ghost named Nurse Kerry. She is said to watch over the tour guides. Her apparition, as well as others, have been seen in the women's ward donning old-time nurses' uniforms and vanishing through stone walls. Others report a tingling sensation in their head when they enter what used to be the shock therapy room. Other ghostly phenomena at Aradale include a room at the J Ward where people suddenly feel sick and unreasonably afraid. Other people slip into a trance-like state, which will pass once they're outside. People have reported being pushed and bitten at J Ward, have heard ticking clocks, methodical banging on the wall, as if someone is banging their head, and cameras and other electrical equipment seeming to malfunction. The ward is also said to be haunted by 3 prisoners who were hanged and buried at Aradale. Because they were convicted of murder, they weren't given a Christian burial. Their graves are only marked with 3 small scratches in the prison wall. Some locals go so far as to say Aradale Asylum is the single most haunted location in all of Australia. While it is certainly reasonable to dismiss these claims of ghostly encounters as either being a product of people's active imaginations at best, or at worst, straight-up fabrications designed to draw in curious visitors, one cannot deny that places such as Aradale that contain a long, dark history of human suffering and misery leaves behind it a sense of unease, especially when you're standing right in a place where a lot of death and violence occurred. If you've been up that way and have done a ghost tour through the asylum, comment below and tell us what your experience was like. Anyways, if you've made it this far through the video, thanks for watching. I want to start a series where I take an in-depth look into all these haunted locations around Australia, and eventually another similar series covering spooky places around the UK, where I'm currently living. Alright, that's all for today. Like and subscribe if you wish, and I shall see you next time. I'm your host, the Silly Ghost, signing out.